I'm so glad that we had the baby at home. It was just so amazing to be supported at home by my birth team in those ways, and trusting my body was doing what it needed to do, even though it was a challenging labor. I wouldn't choose a birth that's that intense or fast, but I could do it again, and I hope I can have another baby again.
In a world obsessed with convenience and quick fixes, I'm approaching wellness differently. After healing from chronic illness by overhauling my entire life, I'm now on a mission to help women like me to thrive and not just survive. I'm Kristen, and you're listening to the OrganiMama Podcast. Hey new parents, if you're looking for an all-in-one resource to create a toxin-free baby registry, you need to grab a copy of my viral guide, OrganiBaby, which has been downloaded by thousands of parents since I launched it in December 2023. OrganiBaby covers what materials and ingredients to avoid in baby items, what materials and ingredients to look for, safe and recommended baby brands, and everything I personally have on hand for my own babies. OrganiBaby is organized into the same exact categories as Babylist, so creating a toxin-free baby registry has literally never been easier. OrganiMama Podcast listeners can get 20% off OrganiBaby with code PODCAST, and the link for OrganiBaby is down in today's show notes.
Welcome back to the OrganiMama Podcast. I am so excited to share my birth story of baby number 3 with you guys today. I am just about a month out from this experience, and my goodness, was it a wild one. And I'm so excited to unpack the whole story for you. But first, I want to preface by saying that if you haven't already listened to my other episodes on pregnancy, breastfeeding, pregnancy prep, blood sugar, just start looking back at my recent episodes from the show, and you're going to see so much good content that I recorded over the last year and have been sharing over the last several weeks, all pregnancy, postpartum, breastfeeding related, including like how I prepped for my birth, how I got through the first trimester of this pregnancy that was really, really rough, the birth stories of my other 2 children, and a lot more. So go back, binge all of those episodes, and then come back to listen to the birth story of baby number 3. So I hit 40 weeks pregnant, and I started having some various experiences of having contractions. Now, in my previous pregnancies, I had more of an overactive uterus, which I didn't really realize was due to dehydration. And so I had a lot of Braxton Hicks throughout both of my previous pregnancies. This pregnancy, I was super, super on top of my hydration. So I didn't really have a ton of Braxton Hicks up until around near when I was full term. And so around 40 weeks, I started to have some prodromal labor, which is essentially like patterns of Braxton Hicks contractions that are more like labor patterns. So you start to have contractions that are growing in intensity, getting closer and closer in the amount of time between contractions, but they don't actually turn into real labor and they eventually fizzle out. So around 40 weeks, I started to have that periodically. And I remember having my birth team on call for my home birth, and I would text them like, hey, contractions started up. They're about 6 minutes apart. I can still talk through them, but just giving you a heads up in case it turns into something else. And well, this literally kept happening to me over days and days and days and days, to the point where I was like, I'm never going to actually go into labor. I'm just going to have all of this, false labor essentially forever. And I'm going to be pregnant forever. And it got really hard mentally. Now, this is not the first time that I had gone way past 40 weeks, but I think because my second baby was born at 40 weeks and 5 days, I was kind of hoping for a similar outcome this time, even though my first baby was a 42-week baby, which if you haven't heard my birth stories yet, you can go back and listen to them. But my first baby was born at 42 weeks via induction. So I was just really kind of hoping that we would be more along the lines of 40 and 5 or 40 and 6 or right at 41 this time. And it just didn't happen. So I just kept waking up every single day pregnant. And there were some posts that I wrote on Instagram at that time that were just kind of me processing the difficulty of going long. And again, there's nothing wrong with going long. It is a completely normal thing to go past 41 weeks, to go to 42 weeks. That is normal. And in fact, I believe the average first-time mom goes to 41 weeks and 3 days. I'm obviously not a first-time mom, but given the fact that both of my other babies have been well past 40 weeks, like past my quote unquote due date, it's not weird at all that my body just cooks babies a little bit longer. So the days were passing by. I'm still pregnant. I'm very sore. But I will say, of all 3 of my pregnancies, this was the pregnancy that I felt the best at this point. So I was staying really on top of hydration. I was staying really on top of what I was eating, especially with my blood sugar stuff that was going on. Be sure to go back and listen to my blood sugar episode. There is so much information in there. And I really think that that is one topic around pregnancy that most women have no clue about. And I wish every woman would know everything about. Blood sugar and pregnancy. It is so important, and eating in a way that honored and regulated my blood sugar in this pregnancy had me feeling my absolute best. I had no heartburn, no swelling, no insomnia. And I even had no postpartum night sweats after this baby was born. And I really believe all of that was due to how I have been eating for the last many months to try and keep my blood sugar regulated. So not only is it beneficial for preventing a baby with macrosomia, but also it just benefits mother so much in how she feels in pregnancy. And if you've had crappy pregnancies in the past where you just felt terrible, I highly recommend tracking your blood sugar and eating in a way that monitors or regulates your blood sugar to feel your best in pregnancy. So I was walking at least 1, if not 2 or 3 miles every single day on my walking pad for all of 3rd trimester. And that was including right up until the day I went into labor. I'll link my walking pad in the show notes for you guys. It's a low EMF walking pad that I just keep in my office, and I would just turn on a show and just walk for an hour or so every evening after dinner. It's the best. It really, truly helped me stay so on top of my fitness goals and helped my pelvic pain not be too severe. I have pretty bad SPD in all of my pregnancies. That gets so bad near the end. And this pregnancy was the least bad. I think it was due to being in pelvic floor therapy and also walking every single day. And walking also is so beneficial for blood sugar. So there's just so many benefits to walking every day. And I stayed super on top of it this time. Whereas in previous pregnancies, I wasn't as much on top of the walking. So anyways, walking every day, eating super nutrient dense and low, like no sugar and very little like standalone processed carbs. And I was still pregnant, still waiting. And I had friends that were due around the same time as me, or even due after me, that were having their babies at like before me. And that's obviously hard to see, but it's just part of how it is. The end is so hard, but the babies do come eventually. And so when I was 41 weeks and 6 days, I had contractions all night long, like through the whole night. And they were stronger than they had been before, and not so strong that I couldn't talk through them or walk through them. In fact, I slept through a lot of them, but some of them did wake me up, and I would be like, I wonder if this is just more prodromal labor or if this is actually real labor. I'm not sure, but I'm just going to try to sleep anyway. So I slept through them. I woke up in the morning and had no contractions at all. Actually, I think I woke up to one really strong contraction around like 9 a.m., like a pretty strong one. And I was like, ooh, interesting. This one's strong. And then after that, there was nothing. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to get up and go about my day. So I did. I went downstairs, had breakfast, saw my husband and my kids, and my mom was in town. And so we were all just together. And then we went down in our basement around noon to like let my kids play. And while we were down there, I had a contraction, and I was like, ooh, that was pretty strong. Maybe a little stronger than some of these prodromal labor contractions I've been having over the last 2 weeks. I'll just, keep an eye on it, but try not to get too mentally hooked in because I didn't want to be disappointed. So I started having more contractions. They were not consistent in the timing, but they were like 10 minutes apart, 6 minutes apart, 20 minutes apart. So not consistent, but they were continuing to come and getting a little bit stronger. So I decided to go upstairs and I took a shower. I ate lunch. I blow dried my hair. I put on some false eyelashes. I was like, just in case I'm going into labor, I'm going to put on some fake lashes that last like 3 to 5 days for me usually. So I was like, even if I don't go into labor today, they'll still probably be good for the next couple days. So I put some lashes on. I put on like a cute, comfortable outfit. And I was continuing to have inconsistently timed but strong contractions. Again, I could still talk through them. I could still walk through them, but they were definitely stronger than the ones that I'd had over the previous 2 weeks. So I was feeling like maybe this will turn into something. So as the day progressed, I mostly stayed upstairs and I was like watching a TV show in my room by myself. I was like doing hip circles on my yoga ball. I spent some time walking back and forth in my room because I felt like the contractions were more consistent when I was walking. I spent some time laying down, and the contractions never stopped. They just didn't really get to be in any kind of consistent pattern in terms of the timing, but they continued to be very strong and they got stronger. And so I texted my chiropractor, who is a friend of mine and lives nearby. And I was like, hey, I think I could be in early labor. Is there any chance that you'd be able to pop over to my house and adjust me? And she's like, hey, we have people over for the afternoon, but as soon as they leave, I can come over to your house around like 6 o'clock. And I was like, cool, sounds good. So she came over around 6 o'clock. And the other thing I forgot to mention is around 5 o'clock, I had bloody show, which is usually a sign that your cervix is dilating and effacing, and like the membranes are opening up. And then usually you can see either like mucus plug or some blood. So I went to the bathroom, wiped, and I noticed some blood. And I was like, okay, this is a good sign. Like something is happening. This doesn't automatically mean that you're in labor if you have bloody show, but it can oftentimes mean that labor is near. And so I texted my birth team. I'm like, hey, I had bloody show. Be on standby just in case things change. I've been having contractions today, but they're not consistent in the timing. And so that was my midwife that I texted, my doula, and then my birth photographer. And so then the chiropractor comes over around 6 o'clock, and I told her, I was like, hey, I had bloody show about an hour ago. I've been having contractions, but right now they're about 10 to 15 minutes apart. And she's like, okay, cool. So honestly, I love her so much. She was so amazing. She worked on me for about an hour, and she did releases on my sacrum. She did work on my pelvis, on my lower back, my hips. She kind of just like worked some serious magic. She had me laying face up. She had me on my side. She had me on my other side. And then she would just like pause anytime I had a contraction. And so then she like had me kind of like standing over the edge of my bed for a contraction. And she was doing like hip squeezes there. And it was honestly insane. And I truly feel like I will recommend this to every pregnant woman is like, if you have a Webster certified chiropractor, well, if you're pregnant and you don't already see a Webster certified chiropractor, make that happen ASAP. Like I was adjusted by this chiropractor throughout my entire pregnancy. And I went 2 to sometimes 3 times a week during 3rd trimester, which was amazing. And I would have instant relief of pelvic pain, pelvic pressure after seeing her. So I really, really think chiropractic care is so beneficial during pregnancy. But if you have the option of being able to see a chiropractor when you think that you might be in early labor, it can actually really help. So listen to what happened. This is kind of crazy. So literally as soon as she finished her adjustment on me that she'd been working on for about an hour, this was around 7 o'clock, I got off the table that she had been working on me on and like had a really strong contraction. And I was like, whoa, okay. I had to like breathe through it a little bit, and then 3 minutes later, another one. And then 3 minutes later, another one. And suddenly they were coming every 3 minutes. And when I realized that real labor was starting, after 2 weeks of prodromal labor, like once I had that like 3rd or 4th contraction that was like 3 minutes apart, I just started crying. And Nick had come into the room at this point and he was like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm just so happy that I'm actually in labor. Like I just had this huge flood of emotions because it had really been just such a challenging 2 weeks of waiting and waiting and waiting and having so many contractions. And I was so relieved that the real thing was happening. And so she packed up her stuff and headed out, and I texted my doula, or I called her actually. And I was like, hey, I think I'm ready for you to come over now. I'm like having to concentrate through surges at this point. And she's like, okay, I'm on my way. So she showed up. My doula was amazing. If you aren't planning to have a doula for your birth, I would really suggest reconsidering, because it was so beyond helpful having a doula, even as a third-time mom who's very experienced with unmedicated birth. Like I know what I'm doing with birth, and it was incredibly helpful to have her.
Hey bestie, if you're pregnant, postpartum, or you just brought a brand new human into your house, this is for you. Indoor air can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air, which I did not know until we lost our first home to mold. Since then, air quality has been a non-negotiable for our family. We use Air Doctor purifiers because they're low EMF, super quiet, and they filter dust, mold, pollen, pet dander, smoke, VOCs, and 99.97% of flu and COVID viruses. Basically, it's one less thing for your postpartum brain to worry about. Check the show notes and get up to $300 off Air Doctor. Protecting your baby starts with the air they breathe.
So she shows up and she's like, hey, how are you feeling? She just kind of stood and observed me for a while. And then we contacted the rest of the birth team and we're like, hey, we think you should head on over. Things are starting to pick up. So my birth photographer is coming from like an hour and a half away. And she was like, okay, I'm going to be there at 9:20. We're like, cool. Because this was around like 8 o'clock, I think, at this point or so. And then my midwife was like, I'll be there in just a little bit. So my midwife brought a backup midwife with her and an assistant midwife. So there were two like trained or two certified midwives, and then one midwife in training, and then my doula, and then my photographer who showed up, and then Nick was there, and then my mom was around. So we had a lot of people in the house. And my mom was watching my other two kids. And so at first, like things were just kind of chill. My contractions were strong. I usually had to like pause and like lean over my dresser to like breathe through them. But in between contractions, I felt fine. But what happened was as my birth team started trickling in, my contractions that had been 3 minutes apart started to space out again. Now, this is very, very normal. It's normal if you're having a home birth and you have a birth team show up. It's also normal if you're having a hospital birth and you go into the hospital. It's so normal for those changes, like people showing up or like you changing environments, to slow things down. Like this is very normal. And it happened to me in my last birth as well, which is when I ended up taking a 90-minute nap. You need to go listen to the birth story of my second baby because that's crazy. That's on the podcast several episodes back. My contractions started to slow down. They were still intense, but they started slowing down to like 8 minutes apart, 10 minutes apart. And then a couple times they were closer to like 15 or 20 minutes apart. So like pretty spaced out. And I was starting to get kind of discouraged because I was like, I don't really feel like I'm really progressing. Like I feel like not really much has happened. I'm kind of wondering if it's going to be like many more hours of this because I'm kind of waiting to see when they're going to get closer together. Because in order for a baby to like be efficiently brought down into the pelvis and out of the birth canal, you need to have those contractions be a little closer together than 8 or 10 minutes apart. And it just wasn't happening. And so we tried a few different positions. I was getting tired. The hours were kind of like going by. This was still considered like early labor because I wasn't in active labor with those close contractions. And so we hit like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I was super hungry at like 11 o'clock. So I ate a big bowl of beef stew, which I realized in hindsight might have been a little bit ambitious of me. Yeah. I'll get to that part. But at like 11 o'clock, I ate a huge bowl of beef stew in between contractions because I was like starving. And so then I decided to lay down for a little bit on the bed, and I had a peanut ball that was between my knees to help keep my hips nice and open, to help baby descend even while I was resting on my side. And so I was there for, I don't know, I want to say probably close to an hour. And my birth team was all just like sitting in there. And then they were like, hey, we're going to actually just go downstairs and let you rest, and we'll let you stay in here with Nick and your doula. And so I was just resting. I was getting kind of frustrated because I was like, these contractions are uncomfortable. Some of them are like pretty strong, but they're just not getting closer together. And when I was laying down, I think that some of them were close to 20 minutes apart. So there was like some pretty big gaps. And so I was like, I'm tired. It's late. I want to go to bed, but I'm also like, don't want to make everyone go home and not have this baby come. So I was talking to my doula and I was like, what do you think I should do? And she was like, well, actually, would you be open to having a cervix check? And I was like, maybe, but also I don't really want to know what I'm at because I feel like I'm probably not very far along and I don't want to be discouraged by knowing what my cervix is at right now. Like if I'm at like a 4 or a 5, I think I'm going to just cry because that to me feels like a long ways to go. Even though I know that cervical progression can change quickly, I don't really want to know. And she's like, okay, cool. But she was like, if we do a cervix check, she was like, it's totally up to you. You don't have to get one at all. I personally just I didn't feel any pressure to get one, but she was like, but if you do let the midwife check your cervix, we might be able to have a better idea of like what direction the baby is. Cause the midwife is able to actually feel the top of baby's head to kind of determine what direction they're facing. If they need to be turned a little bit for more optimal pressure on the cervix to help it dilate in a face. And she was like, also, she can kind of feel to see like if your bag of waters is bulging at all, like if we want to have breaking your waters as an option, we can know that. And she was like, I don't think you want that. And I was like, no, I don't want to have my water broken, but like, I think it can be helpful to at least just know where I'm at. So I agreed. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'd be open to a cervix check, but I don't want to know what number I'm at. So my midwife came in. It was a very, very gentle check compared to some of the ones I have had in the hospital in my first pregnancy. It was not really that uncomfortable for me at all, but I felt like I could tell based on like what I was feeling when she was checking me. I could tell just by feeling her fingers, I could feel that her fingers weren't very spread apart. And I was like, okay, I'm probably not like super progressed. And so she did not tell me what the number was, but she did say, your waters, like your amniotic sac is very pressed against baby's head. So even if we wanted to break your water, which I don't think you want, we couldn't right now because of how like tight the bag of waters is around baby's head. Like I couldn't even break your waters if we wanted to. I was like, okay. And so she said, I think you kind of have like 2 paths to consider. One, you can try to get some sleep and you don't need to worry about the rest of the birth team. We're fine. You can try to get some sleep. You can lay on your side. We can do like elevated side lying, or we can put you into some more like active positions and get some more movement going that may help open your hips up and your pelvic inlet to get baby to descend better. And so she like left the room and went back downstairs. And then I was sitting there with my doula and I was just like, I'm so tired, but I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep because these contractions are strong when they come. And I want to get things going. So I was like, I remember turning to her and being like, can you tell me what to do? And she was like, I can't tell you what to do, but here's what I would recommend. And she said, I recommend that you go downstairs and you start going up and down your basement stairs sideways, like up sideways, down sideways. She said that kind of is similar concept to like curb walking, but essentially that movement of your hips unevenly can kind of like help open up your pelvis and move baby down. The other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that my 2-year-old was sick that night. And so he only wanted to be with Nick. And so Nick had to keep popping out to be with him and then coming back in and then popping out because he would wake up crying. And then I think my mom ended up just taking him into his room and like letting him watch worship music videos on her phone or something because he literally wouldn't sleep. Like he wouldn't just go to sleep. He would just lay there and cry for Nick, but she wanted Nick to be with me. So it was a little bit of a rough night. So anyways, we went downstairs. I got to the basement stairs and I just started slowly. I was like holding onto the railing. I was slowly going down, slowly coming up. And it was I kid you not, the craziest thing. So this was at midnight. Okay. So I got my cervix exam at midnight or like right before midnight. And then that's right when I went downstairs to the basement stairs. So I start going up, start going down. Literally within a minute of starting this up and down the stairs thing, I had the strongest, most intense contractions I have ever felt, ever. And that's saying a lot because my first birth was no epidural with Pitocin. And if you have had an induction, you know that those Pitocin contractions are no freaking joke. And these were stronger than that. These ones I had on the stairs. Every single contraction that I had, I would drop to my knees on the stairs and just be like trying to go as limp as possible. And I was vocalizing through every single contraction. Like I felt like I was being so loud. Obviously your like perception of yourself when you're in labor is a little bit skewed and odd because you're just like only partially there in your mind. But like I'd have to go down on my hands and knees on the stairs for every single contraction. And they were coming like every 2.5 minutes, pretty much consistently every 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes, as soon as I started doing the stairs. So I'm going up, I'm going down, I'm having to stop every few steps to like take another contraction. And I'm like, this is the most intense thing I have ever experienced. I actually kind of low-key felt like my insides were getting ripped out. But what I kept coming back to was there is purpose to this pain right now. There is purpose to this intensity right now. These are strong because they're bringing my baby down and I'm getting closer and closer and closer to meeting him. Every single contraction, I am closer to meeting my baby. And then I also thought of this concept that I hear all the time in the, unmedicated birth space, which is these contractions are not stronger than me because they are me. This is my body working for me. And yes, it was very hard. And I was struggling, to be completely honest. Even as somebody who has trained very hard for unmedicated birth and has been through it twice before, these were very intense and very hard. But I had Nick right there. My doula was sitting right at the top of the stairs encouraging me. And she would just say, "You're doing so great, mama. Like, those are great sounds. Like, that you did a great job." And then she would remind me, like, relax your shoulders, relax your forehead. And so I would be relaxing through the whole thing and just continuing to plod up and down the stairs with these crazy contractions coming. And then at one point I was back down on all fours on the stairs, taking a contraction. And I remember just being like, "Jesus, please help me right now." And I said, like, "Lord Jesus, save me. I can't do this." And I think it was maybe the next contraction after that. I was near the top of the stairs. And I just kept saying, "I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore." And it was weird because I kind of had this like out of body moment where I was like hovering over myself, looking down at myself, like on the floor on all fours, taking this contraction, saying like, "I don't want to do this anymore." And this part of me that was kind of looking down on me, this out of body experience was like, "Hey girl, so you're in transition, right? Like, people always say they don't want to do it anymore when they hit transition, which means your baby is probably about to come out." And I just kind of had that thought as I was in that moment. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think I might be close to having this baby. But I was also totally in denial because I was like, I just had a cervix check and I don't think I was very far along at that point. And I will tell you now, I didn't find this out until after I had the baby, but when she checked my cervix, I was at 5 centimeters. So only halfway to 10 centimeters. And so this is now like 11 that was at midnight. And then when I'm at this point on the stairs, it's like 12:30. So it's only been a half hour and I'm like in transition. And I was like, "Hey," I said to my birth team in between contractions, I was like, "I think we should go back upstairs." And they were all like, "Yes, we agree. You sound very different than you did when you came down here 30 minutes ago." So we all made our way upstairs. It was very hard for me to climb the stairs to get back up to the top floor of our house because I had a contraction that came on the second, like the set of stairs between our main floor and our second floor. I had to pause on those stairs to have another contraction. And I was right outside one of my kids' rooms on the stairs there. And I was like really nervous. I was going to wake them up with how loud I was. And so had one contraction there and then made it up into my room, had another contraction that I made it right to the foot of my bed. And I kind of collapsed down onto my knees at the foot of the bed and had a contraction there. And spoiler alert, I never moved after that. So this was close to 11:40 that I started contracting at the foot of my bed. And I remember saying to my midwife, after one contraction, I said, I felt a little pushy there. Like I didn't push, but I could feel some pressure. And I just was completely in disbelief. Like I could not believe what was happening. And they brought me out a cool washcloth and put that on the back of my neck because I was getting very hot. And around like 11:45 or so, I said, I don't want to wear my clothes anymore. So I had like a robe on and I just like ripped it off. And again, that's another sign that you're probably about to have your baby, especially if you, like me, are generally kind of a modest person and you like to stay like pretty much covered up for the most part. I just suddenly had zero care about that and just wanted my clothes off because I was so overstimulated and hot. And it all happened very, very fast. And so at like 12:52, I had a contraction come and my body started pushing. I think so. My body started pushing and my birth team was like hearing my voice because like when you're really in it, your voice changes. So like there's different sounds that women make as they're about to push out a baby. And so I went from like deep moaning and groaning to like pushing sounds. And I think my birth team heard it. And all of a sudden I realized that they had like taken off the disposable underwear I was wearing because I had put those on earlier in case my water would break, which it never did. They like ripped off my disposable underwear and put like a puppy pad down on the floor. I think that was already there maybe, but they like Nick put gloves on, the assistant midwife put gloves on. She grabbed like a warm compress to like hold over my perineum because I was starting to push. And then all of a sudden, like I was crowning and I like have a video of it and they were like, oh, there's the head. And then my body was just pushing. Like I could not push if I wanted to. Like I could not hold it back. And all of a sudden it was just like so intense. I felt the ring of fire. My body was just pushing and I was like so loud and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even like hold in my sound. And so Nick was right there behind me to catch the baby. And so his head came out and he was still in the sac, which is called Caul. And the assistant midwife was holding a compress on my perineum to like help just keep good pressure on everything. And so his head came out and then we waited for another contraction to come before I pushed out his body. And the assistant midwife who's in the room, who has like a ton of experience, she is a home birth midwife in the area that we live in. She encouraged me and she said, on the next contraction, when you push out the body, try to not let any sound come out of your mouth. And actually, I thought that was really helpful because it reminded me that I needed to like channel my energy down, like a J breath. So like channeling my energy down instead of like expending energy out of my mouth. And so I like did my very best to like keep all of my sound inside my body and to like channel everything down instead of out my front. And that really helped. And it was one really quick push and his whole body came out. And the sac like broke kind of as he was like coming out, like broke around his feet, I think, but the sac was still completely covering his head and shoulders. And so Nick caught him and then pulled the sac off of his face. And then I kind of like got up on all fours and they were able to pass him to me underneath. And I, took him right into my arms. And I truly was in so much shock because this was at like 12:59. So it had been less than an hour since I had that cervix check. And it was right after the baby came out that my midwife was like, so when we checked you an hour ago, you were at 5 centimeters. And I was like, are you serious? Like that is so fast. Dilating from a 5 to a 10 in whatever it was, 50 minutes or whatever. That is nuts. That is truly nuts. And no wonder my labor, my active labor there at the end was so intense because my body was working so fast to bring that baby down. And so it definitely took me like a couple minutes to like catch my breath and like kind of catch myself because it had been such a whirlwind of the last hour. It had gone from kind of very lull-esque to very intense, like at the drop of a hat, the second I started climbing those stairs. And it was crazy. So yeah, so I sat there on the floor, I held him, Nick was right there. It was amazing. And then they helped me climb up onto the bed, and I kind of laid there on the bed for a few minutes waiting to see if I could birth my placenta. And I did. It was, I don't know. I don't exactly remember how many minutes it was, probably like 10 or 15 minutes after the baby came out, I birthed the placenta. And we put the placenta in a bowl because I wanted to wait a while to cut baby's cord. And he was just so sweet. And I was really curious to know how much he weighed. He was so sweet and he wasn't really crying. He was just kind of sleepy. And so I just held him, and he they said that he had like more meconium within that like first hour of being born than any baby they had seen before. He passed a lot of meconium, which was kind of funny because it like got all over me and all over the blankets and stuff, but we like cleaned him up. And then, we got to just snuggle on the bed for a while. That was like so nice. And then my midwives drew me up an herbal bath in my bathroom. And when I was ready, we, cut the cord, and then I went to the bathroom. They like helped me walk to the bathroom and like take my first, go pee for the first time because they want to make sure that you're able to. And then we took a bath together, me and the baby. He really did not like it. I think he was cold the whole time, so he kind of cried the whole time, but we got some sweet pictures of like us in there together. And at this point, my mom had come in. She traded with Nick. So Nick went back to be with my 2-year-old in his room, and my mom came in and got to meet the baby and got to be with me for a little bit, which was really sweet. But yeah, we just had like this really nice, gentle recovery. And then after this nice warm bath, and I got on comfy jammies and got back into bed. And then we weighed the baby, and he was 9 pounds, which I felt really proud of given the fact that my first baby was also born at the same gestation at 42 weeks and was 10 and a half. And the fact that this baby born at 42 weeks was 9 pounds felt like a really big victory to me. So make sure, if you're interested to hear more about that, go back and listen to my pregnancy and blood sugar episode. But it was just so peaceful and beautiful. And the like golden hours that we had after birth, the birth was intense. Like, I'm not going to lie, it was very intense, but all of the like recovery and the part afterwards was just so lovely and calm. And the one part that was a little bit challenging, well, there was 2 parts that were challenging. First of all, the afterbirth contractions were pretty strong. So I was taking the after ease tincture to help with that. And then I decided I don't think it was until the following day, but my afterbirth contractions were so intense that I decided to take some ibuprofen. No regrets. It really helped. So Nick got me some dye-free ibuprofen, and I took that for like 48 hours or so. But one of the really challenging parts of the postpartum, the initial postpartum experience, was that the baby was so sleepy, I think, because of how fast the labor was. I think he was quite tired from the labor experience, because don't forget, your babies are also experiencing labor too. They're getting smushed, they're getting pushed, they're getting moved down. There's a whole lot of trauma that happens to babies as they're making their way out. So they can be really exhausted from birth. And because I had such a precipitous labor, especially right at the end, I think my baby was just so tired. So we like worked really hard to try to get him to latch for breastfeeding, and he just wasn't interested at for the first couple hours. So I ended up letting him sleep. And he just was so sleepy that he wasn't interested in latching. After like 4 or 5 hours, he still wasn't, because he was so tired. So what I ended up doing was hand expressing about teaspoon of colostrum, and then I spoon fed it to him to keep his blood sugar up. So just know that that's something you can do. Like if you're in the hospital and they're telling you, like if your baby hasn't latched yet and they're telling you like, oh, you need to supplement with formula, you can say, no, actually I'd like to use my own colostrum and I'd like to spoon feed it or cup feed it to my baby. That's totally acceptable. So I did that to keep his blood sugar up. And then after like 6 hours or 7 hours after birth, then he woke up and then he latched. And there's like a lot more to tell about the breastfeeding experience we've had this time around, because it did not go well, but he was able to latch after like 6 or 7 hours, and transfer milk. So, the breastfeeding part of it, I'll save that for another time to talk more about my breastfeeding experience with baby number 3. But that is the birth story. It was crazy. It was wild. It was very, very intense, but it was so amazing. And the Holy Spirit was just so present with me. And, like about a week after it was over, about a week after the baby was born, I said to Nick, I was like, I wouldn't choose a birth that's that intense or fast, but I could do it again. And I hope I can have another baby again. So not anytime soon, but I'm not like, it didn't like traumatize me to the point of like, I'm like, I could never do that again. I'm like, no, I could do that again. It was really, really hard, but I could totally do it again. And I'm so glad that we had the baby at home. It was just so amazing to be supported at home by my birth team in those ways. And, just trusting my body was doing what it needed to do, even though it was a challenging labor. It was really incredible. And I have the sweetest baby as a result of it. We are so obsessed with him, and his big siblings love him so much. And he's just the sweetest little third baby, the biggest blessing to our family. And children are such a blessing, and pregnancy can be really hard and birth can be really hard, but it is such a beautiful portal between like our physical world and bringing a new life in, and just the connection between heaven and earth that happens during a birth is so hard to describe, but it is incredible. And even though that particular labor and birth were probably my hardest in some ways, I still love giving birth, and I still think it's amazing. And if the Lord ever blesses us with more kids, I will be excited to experience it again. And I do feel like there were a lot of lessons that I learned this time around with just how fast and intense my labor was. And honestly, if I ever do have another child and have a similar labor experience, I feel like I'm more prepared for how to handle like a precipitous labor because of going through it this time. So it's really crazy to me how different each of my births have been. And they say that third baby is the wild card, and that's definitely been true. It's been true of my pregnancy. It's been true of my birth. It's been true of my breastfeeding experience. But I'm so grateful for it. So that is the birth story of baby number 3, who we call lovingly on the internet, we call him baby edamame. So if you see me talking about baby edamame on Instagram, that is baby number 3. We do not share our kids' real names. So we refer to our kids as marshmallow, casserole, and edamame. If you've ever been wondering why I talk about my kids that are named after foods, they're not actually named after foods. I just don't like to exploit their personal details online. So that's the birth story. Thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next week on the OrganiMama Podcast.
Okay, who else is confused about pregnancy? You know, that moment when you pee on a stick, scream a little, and then instantly start Googling, wait, what? What foods should I eat? Do I actually need to have a birth plan? And is it weird that my belly button is trying to escape my body? I would like to tell you about the OrganiMama's Guide to Pregnancy. It's like having that one friend who's done all the homework, but without the judgment. We're talking trimester tips, meal ideas, birth prep, ultrasounds, the glucose test, all wrapped up in one beautiful digital guide. If you want to go from, I have no idea, to, yeah, I've got this, check the show notes, click the link, and grab the pregnancy guide. Podcast listeners can get 20% off with code PODCAST.